All right, we are going. All right, so I have a good buddy of mine on Zen and Call Signs, and his name is Pierce Fronheim, and we have a long history together. From starting off in the Marine Corps at the basic school in TBS, where we initially met, and it's been a little while now. But and I kind of starting off how I typically do is like I wanted to, have you on because you have all of us have an interesting journey of where you're at now and what you've done, what you've experienced, and I think it's unique. And but so if you want to kick it off with I think from our first experience, I'll kind of give step it up, but our first experience, so becoming a Marine officer and like going to Quantico, like we're going to Quantico and I go up into the barracks and I'm like, oh, and then the first person I check into at the basic school is you. And then Pierce is like really like very straight laced Marine and I'm kind of like, hey, what's up, bro? And it was and that was the first experience. I'm like, he's a little too straight laced. I don't know. But here we are, like, fuck, that's 2007. So
Yeah, so
good bit
I,
of
I
time later.
think I remember when you said the basic school, that memory came flooding in of,
Yeah.
in the room, I'm in a leadership position. This is an officer training school in Quantico, Virginia. And I think I was checking you in or getting some information. I was very like, hey, listen here, I'm in charge, just, but, and I think I had already had the 4 years of ROTC kind of experience to where I was already like, this is my idea of leadership, and I need to be firm
Yeah.
and just kind of. But yeah, wow, that was a long
What,
time ago.
going back to there's like what made you want to join the Marine Corps? Was like how did you fall into that? Certainly coming from Carnegie Mellon, computer science background, like what
hmm
drew you?
Yeah, so I mean, growing up, military history, you learn it in America. You get this sense of fulfilling a higher purpose, being a part of something bigger than yourself, and it's very honorable and admirable in the U.S. to serve your country, to give back. And I think I went on a visit with my folks. We stopped at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. I think I was 16 at this point, and that was the first moment where I was like, "Wow, this is really cool! Like they're getting an education, they're getting leadership experience." Um, Serving as an officer in the military is certainly going to be different than going straight into corporate America or, you know, doing cold calls or writing computer programming code for some bank. So I knew it would be adventurous. I would get uh, the chance to see the world and get great experiences. And certainly, it was with family, with your friend networks, your high school. It's just, you see people going into it above you, going to the Naval Academy, going to serve. Obviously, there were wars going on at that point, so you're very much, motivated by that potential challenge in front of you uh, to go be a part of history. And certainly, there's a lot of, nationalism involved in that. Obviously, well, not obviously, but my views have changed a little bit on humanity and the
Uh,
nature of man and warfare, which we can get into. But
yeah.
yeah, I look back at that 10 years as just an absolute blessing. Uh, I know that I was supposed to go do that. About halfway through, it was in the training for our first deployment. I was kind of like, okay, this is interesting. I'm not sure about this warfare stuff and what we're doing, but I think a lot of guys will echo too, especially veterans. It's not so much the idea of nation on nation, but you're in this tight fraternity and you share a special bond with the people to your left and right, to where you pretty much lay down your life for them, and you don't. really find that many other places. Yeah, it was just the training, flying aircraft, starting from flight school all the way up to these $100 million unit space helicopters, first of its
It's
kind.
actually like 145 million a copy now. Just
Wow. Yeah,
yeah.
so we flew the Osprey. I mean, we were literally in the first few hundred guys that flew the Osprey, and this thing was just a beast. I mean, the training manual alone was bigger. It was about a phone book and a half thick. And the complexities of aerodynamics, like we were truly on the cutting edge. Yes, it was these DOS technology that forms the basis of the avionics and the logic of how everything's working in the plane. But, fly by wire, it's the latest military hardware. But where we were truly at the cutting edge was we were in a machine that's mixing aerodynamics. So if you think, a plane with a motor on the front and wings, how that works, rotary aerodynamics, which in itself is kind of black magic. I tell people that in Pensacola when we sat through the rotary aerodynamics course and they explain, all of the forces and what's happening in the rotor blades and down to the minute molecules of air, you're just like, I can't believe this works. And I can't believe
Yeah.
this dude Sikorsky like figured out how to solve all these problems and allow
Yeah.
a couple thousand
Yeah.
pieces of metal and some spinning things to repeatedly and somewhat safely fly through the air.
Yeah.
So then with the
Yeah.
Osprey, add in the third part of just some pure black magic. And that's you're changing from a helicopter to an airplane and how how they figured that out and how they created safety windows and made the software work and the physics of it. It's one of the greatest marvels in for humanity in engineering, bar none. So to fly that thing
Yeah.
and to learn it and to learn leadership in the cockpit, we're a multi-crewed
And
aircraft.
to
So
to not die, to
yeah,
not die, that's a good one. Check.
yeah, I mean, a lot of close calls, but looking back, wow, I studied all the mishaps and because I
Yeah.
myself wanted to stay alive and, not be responsible for the death of your other crewmates and passengers. So I thoroughly studied every mishap. They'd put out
Yeah.
a report, hundreds of pages, and I would comb through this thing and just be like, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I not do this? How can I not let the hazardous attitude of machismo or I know it all or I just need
Oh yeah.
to force this issue? How can I not let that creep in? And, how can I make the right calls regardless of rank of when we need to knock something off or talk about something? To be honest, that wasn't an inherent challenge because we served in a community where there were new pilots who only trained on the Osprey, and then there were other guys coming in from Vietnam era helicopters, much simpler, rotary wing mentality only. And then you had guys
Yeah.
coming in from jets and C-130s who looked at flying a completely different way. So all of that mixing together created very challenging circumstances. We were literally writing the manual while we were serving, while we were figuring out how to deploy this aircraft, uh, with skids, with jets, off of ships, in the mountains, in the desert. So yeah, it was a challenge, but I took so much from it. The lessons
Yeah.
from that of adapting to stress, which you know you look at any helicopter pilot and you say, yeah, we would land in the desert at 200 feet potentially, given the conditions in the landing zone. How thin the dust or powder was. You could completely lose all visual reference at 200 feet
Yeah.
and still be 1,000 meters from your landing point. And from that point, we would switch to visual, looking outside, to inside, we had a hover page, which would show you three-dimensionally. It would have like a velocity vector. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this in video games and flight simulators, but
Yeah. Yeah.
essentially you're looking at this page, but you have to create a 3D picture in your mind of the aircraft through time and space while talking to crew, uh, and safely, you know, in the correct parameters for the profile to keep the plane not falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
Um, so to create that 3D image in your head of, bank pitch, yaw, speed, vertical speed, like 10 other things, and land. Uh, if you would say that to a helicopter pilot, they're like, that's completely insane. So what we
Yeah.
were doing was something brand new. Yeah, it was a tough skill to get really good at, but luckily we had simulators where we could practice, and I called it doing batting practice. But yeah,
Oh
I mean
yeah.
there were two parts to your military job. In the Marine Corps, they, do more with less. So you would have the flying part of your job, which if you were an Air Force pilot, it would pretty much end there, and you would only focus on flying because you're a pilot. Where in the Marine Corps, you would have a secondary job, which could have been in anything from writing the flight schedule. A squadron would have a flight schedule similar to an airline that would be put out with training, with, recurrent checks, all sorts of things. It was a big puzzle to put together. So operations, logistics, substance control. I was the piss test guy for a while, which it was a job I absolutely hated. Um, but yeah, it
The
was
is it called the Wizzo, right?
yeah, Sacco was it?
That's
But
right.
yeah, so you had these two competing responsibilities, and it was really the guys who kind of really got it would ultimately have to kind of sacrifice a little bit of the focus on the ground job to focus on the flying, which is really the important thing. But unfortunately, like anything else, it's no different in investment banking, hospital systems, everything at the end of the day for moving up in the world in those structures turns into FaceTime, turns into bullet points, and we all know that. But yeah, the flying was just spectacular. I mean, what I learned from it, the places I saw, where we
Oh yeah.
went, landing on ships at night, flying up in the Sierra Nevadas. I was lucky enough to participate in a presidential movement up in Los Angeles. So, I mean, I remember taking off a three ship, so three Ospreys, out of the parking lot of the Rose Bowl when Obama was in town doing podcasts and various things throughout LA. And we're flying at 300 feet, 300 miles per hour through downtown LA with the entire Class Bravo airspace shut down just for us to land at LAX. And we're coming in on a final at LAX, and I see 25 jumbo jets lined up holding short, and I'm like, wow, like this is all stopped for us. So yeah,
Yeah.
really, really
Wow.
cool experiences flying in other countries, experiencing other, air traffic controllers and just other militaries, talking to those guys. And yeah, it was, I mean, to me, the biggest way I've learned in my life is experiencing other cultures, what they think, what they eat, how they pray, how their family relationships are, their friend relationships, and then into the darker side, which is, the same thing anywhere. How does money laundering work here? How does the government work? How corrupt is it? How does human trafficking work? And anywhere I really
Yeah.
went, military or in my own personal travels, you just sit down at the bar and you ask someone and they'll start telling you, especially if you're an American. So yeah, travels and learning culture, that's been like the biggest way I've learned in my life. So the military was a huge, huge part of that because it got me out of my bubble in Western Pennsylvania. If I
Yeah.
hadn't joined the military, I would have stayed there and I probably would have got an IT job for some company, managing people writing code, and I'd worship
Yeah.
local sports team, go to games, and every 6 months I'd have a vacation and drive my family down to Ocean City, Maryland, and like that would be my existence. So yeah, I
Would
mean,
you
I'm on
say that that the military like made you comfortable with uncertainty?
to say the least.
Yeah.
Just squadron life in general. Uh, on the daily, there was change, there was friction, whether it
Yeah.
was writing a schedule, uh, planning. I worked in logistics and embarkation, but as a 23-year-old first lieutenant, I was planning and executing the movement of 1,300 people, something like 28 aircraft, hundreds of uh, big shipping containers filled with gear from 5 locations in the United States, from bases and other locations, out to 3 ships and also to other countries. So to get that
Yeah.
experience as a young lieutenant was, I mean, it really made me grow, and the problem solving, critical thinking skills, and just the human aspect of it too. It was just incredible.
Yeah. Do you have any culminating moment, good or bad or ugly? Could be leadership, could be flying, something, or maybe you have a couple of them that you'd like to share, like that either shaped you, changed you, uh, made you better, made you happy, anything, any good story, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We went through some tough times with flying in the military. They kind of say in the ready room, which is the room where you brief and prepare for a flight, and then after flight you come back and talk about it. The bobs or the bosses would always say, "Hey, there's no rank in the cockpit," and if it's related to flight, get it out there, and we're all going to improve and get better from it, and the same with mishaps.
Yeah.
I went through the training in Pensacola for aviation safety officer, which is on the level of NTSB, which are the folks that go out and investigate if there's a civilian crash. So you're at that level, like
Yep.
you can look at a snapped wing at a aircraft mishap site, and based on the how the structure broke, you can look at the fibers and tell, and like down to that level. So back to the ready room stuff, there's a lot of psychology in flying, and there's a lot of psychology in the cockpit. The military, there's a lot of, I'll call it type A personalities, which now to me, I look back and that really just means mom and dad issues. Because it's, this, I'm gonna, but it's, if someone's overpowering or not kind of following the logic of safety, and it can get kind of hairy pretty quick. So, I mean, you could love a guy, he could have a great personality, but he could be doing weird things in the plane, or flying outside of a profile that we train to, and there's reasons that we train to it, and then within a flight, it's what everyone's expecting from everyone else. And when you're coming into a landing zone, in low light conditions, there's no moon, you're on night vision goggles, you can barely see anything. You want to have that implicit trust between the aircraft, that you're going to, fly the profile. But also, if you get out of that, or if you're not feeling it, or if something's wrong, that, you're going to take it around, or call it knock it off. We call it in training. Because that's all we were. We were in a training environment, and the zone's not hot. We're not in a war. So when guys would get outside of that due to, let's just call it what it is, ego, and that can creep in the military, because you're like, no, I need to stick this landing. if I don't, I'll look weak or I'll look like I'm
Yeah.
incompetent. So that was a delicate balance. And there were leaders that I had that, had really amazing personalities, but, they would do something in the plane where I was next to them and I could say like, hey, wave off or hey, take it around, I mean, to the
Right.
level of like flying above another aircraft, like in a landing zone, hovering, and you're like, okay, this is really
You don't want to be
uncomfortable.
above them, right?
And if we were to lose an engine right now, which a good pilot always trains to that, and they always have that what they're going to do ready, and in addition, that if you switch the controls and if you were doing that, that you would kind of get your head ripped off, and then it would be like a squadron wide issue, and you would be a big problem. Or if you swap that around, it's just that tough
Yeah.
guy or
Well, I
ego or
think,
machismo mentality can
yeah,
keep
well, it's
doing it.
like, yeah, you're describing
Just
like, what both of us experience as a double standard for younger company grade officers when they're flying with field grade officers. And I think people can, they can look that up, but, it's first lieutenant, second lieutenant, captain versus major, lieutenant colonel, colonel. It's the hypocrisy of it. There's a double standard. A lot of things that, when you look back, you're kind of like, and even and especially in the Marine Corps, you think like there's not supposed to be because we all have to take the same PFT, the same tests, physical fitness test.
right.
And didn't you just say that there's no rank in the cockpit? And then the guy refers to me as Captain Fisher. I'm a major, I'm a major. So, but yeah, and I think that you're describing, but like I even look at that a microcosm going up to not just me in the cockpit, but the failure of the pullout of Afghanistan. How is
Mm,
it that the one person got fired that I know of was a lieutenant colonel in Camp Lejeune that questioned the what the fuck were they doing? And that's the same thing that we experience. That
mhm.
there's like, there's the standard for you, but I'm different. And that's, in the Marine Corps, like that's fucking wrong, or when a Marine colonel walks up and hands the sergeant, here's my PFT score, 297. And you
Yeah.
see that this Marine colonel's, an obese piece of shit, lying piece of shit. And you're kind of like, oh, yeah, you just like, you question everything then. And so I believe for whatever our gen is, like that is very smart and inquisitive and contrarian, they're like, oh, that's the game you're playing. Okay. And I think that like on our deployment, our that we deployed together is that, certain individuals felt like, hey, these guys, these young guys don't like me and it seems weird. And it's like, yeah, dude, because you're an incompetent moron and we don't trust you because you will kill us. Right? What I mean? Like what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah.
So
So just to, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but to that example, it was like that officer who, again, amazing personality, totally respect the guy. It's just like even down to the last day of my career when, he's given a little speech about me, we kind of locked eyes and I could see the memory of that incident in his eyes. And he's like, I'm full of shit. Like, I never addressed it. I, pulled
yeah,
rank or whatever you want to call it. But
yeah, yeah,
so, I mean, we could list off hundreds of these incidents, and I can say, while I was serving, you have access to everything. There's back channels, you have buddies in the Pentagon, in Quantico, and Marine Corps is very small. So whenever there was an incident, you knew the real story that wasn't in the headlines. Whenever there was a mishap, especially if it was your squadron, you had the black box and you had an engineer there plotting out the data points. You could recreate before it even got to a mishap board what the inputs the pilot was making. So you couldn't hide anything. Um, and we could certainly
Yeah.
name off a lot of these. And it was tough to watch these guys kind of fake it, if you will, for no better term. But you know, they were stuck between I'm older, I don't want to have to learn new things. I'm going to rely on my stick and rudder skills from another aircraft to just kind of funk my way through this. And in
Yeah.
general, what
Yeah.
all this taught me, because it's really no different at Goldman Sachs. You know, if you're that
Yeah.
junior
Yeah.
analyst living in Manhattan with three buddies in the Upper East Side paying 7,500 a month rent for your one bedroom apartment because you're like, this is my dream. I want to make partner at Goldman and I want to make a lot of money and have this luxurious life. When you get called in on Sunday to work for 16 hours to redo and build a completely new prospectus for the client that needs to be ready for 6 a.m. Monday, but then you realize your boss just did it to fuck with you and it was just a power move and it's all psychology. Uh, Same thing in the hospital system, because if you look at Western healthcare since the 1930s, it's been militarized. It's a pyramid. You can make parallels between the military and the Western medical system directly. Your enlisted would be your nurses. They're trained in basic level skills. They kind of have one job, where your doctors would be your officers. They have a college education. They have more education and training. They have a higher level skill, such as being a pilot, managerial skills, such as, you know, you're not just going to fire the artillery tube, but you're going to understand the logistics of moving them, how to employ a firing line, uh, way more advanced into, I don't know the word for, I'm blanking on it, but like artillery rounds spinning through the air and all the geometries, all that stuff. So while the enlisted or the nurse just see that one part, you see the bigger picture. And then thirdly would be the business side of hospitals. So I lost your video. I lost you.
All right. I'm
All
back
right,
with
I'm
you. Can you
guessing,
hear me?
yeah, I got you. So the third, you got me?
Yep.
EFO.
Good.
So the third part of that would be the business side of hospitals, because it's no secret that Western medicine is a big time for profit business. So, for example, I have a family member who's a primary care physician just at a regular practice, and he was working some years ago, and it was just four doctors, and he had a pretty somewhat chill schedule, but he was a happy guy. And then I saw him 4 years later, and a investment group had moved in, completely taken over. So the way they do it is they say, hey, we're going to manage everything. We're doing all the paperwork, insurance, billing, liability. You won't have to do anything. But then that turns into the doctors having like three times as many appointments. So they have these 15-minute windows for 8 hours a
Yep.
day, and it's just nonstop. And then the doctor becomes so stressed. I had noticed that my family member had put on weight. He was stressed, like not just looking as good mentally. And he explained that to me, that his practice had changed. And so that business side would be like defense companies. So when you know, Northrop Grumman, all these giants that produce all the gear that we use to go fight wars, and you can go back to World War II with influence on kind of keeping the machine running and how much profit there is through war. And you brought up Smedley Butler, who's one of my favorite Marine generals, who famously said war is a racket and kind of outlined all that. But you know, it's a tough subject. We can get into
Yeah.
the thanks for your service stuff pretty soon. But the analogy I'm really making is it's all the same. No matter if you're in investment banking, a hospital system, or the military, it's all the same structure. There's going to be the same friction points, stressors, micromanagement, good leadership, bad leadership. It's just what you take from it. The only added thing in the military is potentially, depending on your job, your life's going to be on the line, and that could add a lot
Yeah.
more stress. And that's what we experienced. So once we got out, we had to start looking for ways to de-stress, to deprogram, to, you know, analyze what we went through, how stressful it was, and how to kind of release that, but also, you know, take pride in what you did and use those skills to better the world.
Yeah, dude. Speaking of that, I mean, I'd like to touch on since we both have a little experience with obviously with transitioning out of the Marine Corps as officers, having served about 10 years or so in, and I think that's for a lot of Marines, any veteran, that's a culminating point of their life because they're making a big change from a pretty regimented life, sometimes from, whatever, 4 to 5 years,
Hmm.
10 years, 20 or longer, and it's a big shift, uncertainty, and I would say a big thing that comes to mind is that 20 to 40 veterans commit suicide a day. And I think that's wild. That is a astronomical number compared to any other subsect of the population anywhere. And so, and I think that there's lots of different ways to combat that, but I think a big important one is psychedelics. I know you have some experience with that. I do a little bit as well. Um, but I'd love to get your take on that of like a potential, a remedy for it. And my thought with, I always think I heard, I've heard this a while back, but it's like there's no profit in the cure. And so what do you think about that?
Absolutely. I would love to jump into psychedelics, but I do want to backtrack a little bit because you talked about transitioning out. And I think I just want to
Yeah.
add my 2 cents for both for people who served and who didn't, who can maybe this will help them better understand what veterans go through. So before I got out, I was stressed to the max, to say the least. I can remember like hair falling out. I was that stressed. Like, what am I going to do now? What, I mean, I have this plan in my head of like airlines or go get an MBA and use the GI Bill and become a product manager for Amazon and live in New York City or LA and get this high
Yeah.
paying, cool job so people respect me. But there was something deeper in me that was like, no, that's not it. That's not it. And so while you're in the military, there's this camaraderie that is just fantastic. Like you just can't compare the experience you get of that camaraderie with shared suffering, going through hard shit, very challenging conditions, whether it was, you know, being cold, wet, and hungry out in the fields of Quantico, digging machine gun holes, versus your aircraft's broke down in the middle of the desert. You're staying the night sleeping in it, and you don't have any food, and you're just sitting there bullshitting.
Yeah.
You really can't compare the camaraderie. You ask, you order, you give an order, a lawful order to a subordinate, or you come up with a plan and you plan out a mission, a flight, a movement, and people follow it. And there's order and there's structure, and that that exists in the military for the most part. We'll say 95%. You're working towards a common goal. So you have this sense of purpose of wearing the uniform. I'm protecting my country. So not just in terms of warfare, but also for humanitarian assistance. The U.S. does a lot of good work. If there's a hurricane or tsunami and the country just gets schwacked, we're flying in food, clean water, et cetera, et cetera. But so one more thing. When you're in the military and you go back to hometown USA, you leave this environment where you're on a base and you're wearing a uniform and everyone's talking a certain way, and you've all been kind of conditioned to that, and it's fun and it feels there's some consistency to it. It's normal, but it becomes you become a part of the machine. So when you go back to hometown USA, it's just a little vacation. And yeah, your same friends from high school are on the same bar stools, and people are working jobs that are pretty boring. Some people are crushing it, others are just kind of like the same person. But it's just a little vacation from that military world that you're in. But until you actually get that piece of paper, your DD-214, excuse me, and you're set off out in the world, until that occurs, that shift, you're not faced with, what is my purpose? What do I want to do with my life? Who am I? So when veterans leave that, service members become veterans and they leave that warm bubble of, hey, I can count on this guy, or we can have a meeting and people are going to show up on time, or I can teach a class and people aren't going to just like start talking over me or interrupting me, because there's this social understanding that like, hey, this person senior to me is teaching me how to fly at night, and he knows the night vision goggles, he knows the FLIR, he knows the night environment, all from experience, and it's very important what he's saying, so I'm going to sit here and pay attention and take notes, and if I have questions, I know that I'm going to wait till the end and he's going to answer them. When you get out into the civilian world, it's just a free-for-all of emotion, of power moves. People don't show up to meetings. People ghost on you. This is in the social world. This is in the business world. I have a cousin that started a $40 million company, and he's like, you just wouldn't believe, even at the highest levels, how much psychology is involved in business. And it's so hard to find good people to work with. It's hard to find good people to raise money with, because you're always facing this psychology of this just randomness. So that's the big challenge for veterans. And did I go through that? Absolutely. I got on a absolute roller coaster with that, because early on in my life, going back to childhood, I started having panic attacks when I was about 14 years old. So a lot of people have of heard of panic attacks, but they don't understand it because you'd have to experience it. But I basically just
Yeah.
explain it as you get really, really nervous, and like just like a sheer terror runs through you, but you have no idea why. And someone from the outside looking at it might say, oh, you're just scared of public speaking, doing hard things, or whatever. But that's not necessarily the case. It can come up just randomly. Like I would get it
Yeah.
ordering at a restaurant, or just being by myself, or it doesn't have to be a stressful situation. So for me, I swallowed that down. I made it through private high school. I made it through a very prestigious university, doing a very challenging academic program. Made it through 10 years in the military, flew these crazy aircraft, briefed auditoriums filled with colonels and generals and admirals, but I still had that underlying panic, anxiety, in and out of really strong bouts of depression. And essentially from ages 14 to 33, I drowned it out with alcohol. Um, you know, I smoked weed a little bit when I was a kid. I was the kid in the neighborhood that hung out with high school kids when he was 12. So I started young. But, you know, the academics and the you know, the lure of going to a good school, college, and good career, military, and thereafter kind of cleaned me up a little bit, but alcohol still remained as my go-to to kind of just, you know, push all those emotions and those unchecked feelings kind of down. So when I was 33, after I got out of the military, I bought myself some more time. So I went into defense contracting, flying King Air aircraft, doing ISR. So a defense contractor works closely with the DoD, but you're in civilian clothes, not in a uniform. So obviously, if you work overseas, you don't have the same kind of priority levels if something bad should happen to you. And I'm sure most people remember from watching the news, like there were a lot of contractors in the Iraq War, Afghanistan wars, and the U.S. has contractors everywhere. I mean, the U.S. has 850 foreign military installations worldwide. We're the only country that's like that. It's just interesting to bring up.
Yeah.
So I, when I was 33, I finally kind of melted down from when I got out of the military to uh, that time frame. I had worked in defense contracting, you know, still wasn't dealing with anything, just kind of partying, making boatloads of money, doing basically before how I spoke about you have the pilot job in the military and then the ground job and all the stress that comes with
Yeah.
that. Just take that part away and you're making the same amount of money and all you do is fly. I mean, besides starting the aircraft and taking off and doing the job and landing, there were zero other responsibilities. So it's pretty enticing work and you know, you get into it and you're like, wow, this is pretty easy. But yeah, I had a good time doing it, but I about a year into that, I was like, I'm gonna go this other route that I was thinking before I got out, which was the go to the top 10 business school, get the MBA, get some more education. I know nothing about finance and all this managerial economics, all that stuff. I didn't really do any of that in college, so I'll go get that, and then I'll get my job at Amazon, and then I'll be okay. So I did enroll. I kind of slimed my way in through connections because I didn't have the GMAT score. That test is brutal. Although my buddy, another one of our pilot buddies, Jay, he literally got like a 97th percentile. He's just an absolute savant. I mean, he
Nice.
outscored all
Nice.
these folks from Asia and everywhere that are coming into U.S. schools. He crushed all their scores and he studied for like 6 weeks. So yeah, I slimed my way in, started the program, and about, I don't know, a month and a half in, my dad was dying of lymphoma, of blood cancer, and I was just a wreck. I couldn't believe I was trying to do school while that was happening because, you know, an MBA program is 24/7. I mean, it's nonstop. The amount of meetings, activities, classes, like networking,
Mm.
it
Yeah.
is a nonstop adventure for 2 years. So you have to really put your life on hold to just focus on that program. So I withdrew from the program, actually started a coding school business with a buddy, a childhood friend in my hometown. That's still going now. I worked on that with him, starting it up. And then I hit the point where, and he could tell too, I was just not feeling good and really in a bad place mentally. So that
Yeah.
ended up with me in the hospital for 4 nights for stress. Essentially, like my brain and my body were not connected. Like neurons were not firing, vagus nerve out of whack, and I was literally like shaking in panic. Like I remember the second day I woke up and I was still in that like shake. So you can imagine how bad I was at that point. But really it saved my life. It was I got out of there. I was like this was the wake up call I needed. And my family members are like, shh, don't tell anyone about this. They're just kind of like, it's kind of that natural tendency to just not air. They look at it as like dirty laundry. That's something. So, but I'm like, I look at it as a blessing. Like I'm gonna change. Like this is it. I'm gonna follow this inner guidance, this intuition, and affect permanent change. Like I don't want to have to rely on alcohol. I don't want to be anxious. Like I don't want to just sit on the bar stool and watch sports. Like I think there's more to life. I want to find my purpose, and I know that's going to take some time because I got to peel back all these layers of just years and years and years of doing damage to myself mentally, physically, emotionally. I hadn't really understood anything of spiritual nature because nothing in the church really made sense to me from when I was as young as I can remember. I remember sitting in the pew looking around like, you guys sure about this? Like, I would look at the priest and it's just this big old guy and blah, 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 and like he had no energy to him. And it almost seemed like a drill cadence, like everyone's saying the same things and people go to this building and then they feel good about it, but they're not actually changing themselves. They're not inspired by what they're receiving and they're not creating miracles in their own lives. It just seemed like a check in the box, if you will.
Phew.
So yeah, from there, to be honest, I just prayed a lot and asked for strength. And I started with certain tools that I always had a feeling about. And the first tool was food. I changed my diet. I started doing yoga, started getting into some light breath work. And the other main thing was I started listening to frequencies, was looking into solfeggio frequencies, these ancient, all they really are is a certain number of hertz. It's just a certain number of cycles per second. That's science.
Yep.
That's not woo. So I was
Yep.
listening to frequencies and having experiences in my body that were new to me and levels of relaxation that were new to me. I was doing yoga, which in the West, what you see at a yoga studio, it's not really yoga. It kind of just got westernized to tight Lulu pants and kind of girl power.
Nice.
None of that's yoga. I don't want to turn this
Yeah.
into an hour discussion about what yoga is. But I woke up and I using my discipline from the military and that internal drive that I had to get better, I got on the internet and I'm like, what the hell's Warrior 2? And I read through 5 articles and just pick out what works and just started waking up, doing yoga every morning. And then I started, feeling my energy and I'm like, what is this? This isn't loss of circulation. This is something more. And, all the weight came off. I was carrying about 50, 55 pounds of just emotion. My
Yeah.
skin cleared up. I had seen at least 20 dermatologists for eczema, psoriasis. I was getting cold sores all the time. I couldn't manage. And, it's just pill, shot, cream. Oh, we got a new one. Here you go. Here you go. And it's like, well, what do I do if it doesn't go away? And it's just, well, you come back to me. I'm the expert. And then I give you another cream. And it's like this little tube of cream costs $700 and with your insurance is 13. It's all just kind of hilarious. But once I changed the food, all my
Yeah.
skin problems went away. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. My mental health, I'm still anxious. Like, yes, I'm starting to change, but that takes years to undo all the damage. So my mental health was fixed at that point, but all I changed was the food
Yeah.
and no more eczema. So that's interesting. It's not something that is really known. Food is another thing that we could talk about for probably 5 hours, but yeah, so I started making changes, and I was just seeing big improvements. And with that, I was studying things like emotional intelligence, mindfulness, reading about it, employing it, meeting friends for coffee and conversation and talking about life versus happy hour and, the hockey game that night. And looking for hobbies and other things and just continuing to learn myself. And yeah, it just kicked off a journey over the last 6 years of self-improvement, knowing myself, finding passions, learning things that really deep down I've always wanted to learn and use, and really what I thought life is all about. And one of those, which we can get into, would simply just be frequency. And that can be in many forms: music, um, binaural beats, pure tone frequencies, but all of it translates into your interpersonal, your social world that you create, because everything's frequency.
Yeah.
I'll curtail into psychedelics now, but just long story short, psychedelics are a tool. If you abuse it, you're
Yeah.
going to have a real bad time. And I've seen that firsthand. I myself, well, I'll save that for a little later, but in general, they're a tool. My entire life I heard, don't do mushrooms, you'll go really crazy and you'll get psychosis and you'll end up in a mental institution. And so there was always that fear, like, oh, you're messed up, buddy. Like, you got problems. Don't do mushrooms because it's going to cause problems in your life. But, I had moved down to Costa Rica because I was kind of always interested in living outside the US for a while. And with all the traveling in the military, I loved other cultures. And Costa Rica is just, it's like you're a National Geographic anywhere you go. The amount of wildlife, the
Yeah.
11 microclimates, just the surf culture. I fell in love with it visiting. So I moved down there and I was dating a girl from Texas. And yeah, it was, I finally tried uh, the hongos, the mushrooms, for the first time. So I had a normal dose of Golden Teacher. And I was like, wow, it just puts you deep into thought. It really connects you to yourself and gives you really an opportunity to assess what's going on. Now, mushrooms will mirror your emotional state. So if you were in a really bad mood or having a bad day and you took some mushrooms, that wouldn't be a good
Yeah.
idea. It's something that's been used throughout history in a religious kind of treating it with the utmost respect. And this goes back
Yeah.
to the just look for proof, but I'm going to see this when I go visit Egypt in a few months, but it's in all the hieroglyphs everywhere. A lot of history is written by the winners, but you can travel the world and actually get the true history. And most of what I've learned is a lot of it's been through street art and just seeing murals and other things like that, which is the funniest thing because you can read what anyone writes or accounts of what happened, but we're learning more and more these days that, you know, what's the true story behind the Titanic? How much of
Yeah.
what happened on 9/11, how much of that is, I don't want to say fact, but there's just certain things that needed to be looked at that were kind of certainly brushed under the rug. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's going back to recorded history. It's your best guess. So I knew that I had to find truth for myself, and in doing and using psychedelics, that's helped me to kind of find more truth to better myself. So yeah, I had that first mushroom experience, and I was living down in Costa Rica, and I did a lot of work. They call them Niños Santos, or the Holy Children, is the Spanish term for it. But I did a lot of work with it. It would usually entail taking a standard dose, 3.5 grams, listening to very high vibrational music, just uplifting stuff that kind of touches the heart. building a fire myself, sitting next to it, and just whatever hurt or whatever I think I needed to work on, which to be honest, it was just a lot of stuff with growing up as a kid and Americana, my old man. A lot of people go through this, and I love my dad very much. He's since moved on, but I see the reason for everything, and he really armed me with the tools to rapidly advance and to get my soul or my spirit where I want it to be prepared for bigger and better things, after we leave this experience. So I say that my dad was a limo driver, just to kind of paint the picture. He knew the back scenes of everything, politics, sports, because he was driving around every actor, politician, billionaire, and these people talk in the car. So he would tell me everything and how everything really works. That was really my first taste of what everyone's actually doing.
Yeah.
How the mafia launders money, different levels of mafia. Like it's not all Tony Soprano. Like this stuff is very ingrained in even in your local neighborhood. So to learn that at a young age and to see it, to understand how much a doctor is getting paid to go give a talk, to or a pharmacist rather, to go give a talk, he gets paid $10,000 by this pharmaceutical company to give a talk on this antidepressant to these doctors, so that when the doctors prescribe it, they're like, yes, this is what the patient needs. This is going to help their the uptake inhibitors and norepinephrine. It's going to help their brain, but it's artificial. There are ways to do that through things as simple as rhythmic breathing, but that's just the world we live in right now. The main option that most people go to, and that comes from the conditioning of the doctor is right, the doctor knows what's best for me, I don't want to cross him. So yeah, that I'm just giving you a peek at what I was experiencing starting at
Yeah.
age 12, and that opened me up to the reality of what's going on in the world. And I think that did honestly contribute to a lot of the panic, because I'm out here having these experiences. I'm in a private high school, and these kids next to me, it's like, well, yeah, their dad's a urologist, but he's actually laundering money from the mob in New York and funneling that into a land development company. And he owns City Hall, so he can make whatever he wants to happen. So I was seeing the Gotham behind the scenes, and I'm like, everything's fake. Like
Right.
you're a nice person, but like the things your family are doing involve like people dying and like mafia type stuff. So yeah, it just kind of would freak me out, but it was really a blessing in disguise, because it got me towards this path of really getting to truth and getting to a
Yeah.
purer self. So I did a lot of work with the mushrooms, and when you release trauma, it can come in many forms. You can scream, you can cry, you can shake, you can feel really bad. But the main secret is, if you want to release it, you have to go to it. And what
Yeah.
the mushrooms do is they get you to the vibrational level, or I'll say emotional level to be more all encompassing. It opens you up so that you can go to that place and feel that anxiety or that depression, or that I'm not good enough, or that time, you bullied someone, or someone was really mean to you, or, your sister-in-law embarrassed you at the wedding, or whatever happened. You go there and you forgive yourself and you forgive everyone else. And as you feel that emotion, your body will kind of tense up, and then it'll release.
Yeah.
And you feel better each and every time you do it. And what I want people to understand is this is permanent change. There's a difference between this and taking an antidepressant. An antidepressant, like I said, it will cause chemical changes in you and give you a feeling of everything's okay and this is good, but they're two different worlds. If you take the antidepressant away, if all of, and this is where I wanted to get to in my life, like I don't want to have to depend on anything. I want to have the
Yeah.
tools in my own body, which I've now discovered. We could get into breathwork in a little bit, but I want the tools to be able to be strong all on my own and not depend on food, alcohol, weed. Weed was another one that had its claws in me for years and years. But yeah, I wanted to just have these own organic, because we're divine beings. We're created in the image of the higher power that you believe in, and everything you need is right inside of you. So yeah, mushrooms, certainly I did a lot of work on my own. Once I had done it once, I wasn't scared to do it by myself. But yeah, it was a lot of nights by the fire, just battling it out. I would say to anyone who has never had an experience, find someone that you know and trust in your social network or a trained facilitator. And that can be wishy-washy too, because they might say, yeah, lay on my couch and wear these headphones, but it's going to be much better for you to get in the nature the first few times you do it. To get away from EMF, to be as in a pure environment as you can on the beach, in the woods. I mean, it sounds hippie, but it's all science at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, and, go in with a good attitude, get an experience under your belt, and then decide, if it's working for you and if it can be a tool. On the other side, I've remembered friends, I have friends that use, friends from high school, college that just use it casually. They'll throw throw down a couple grams and go to a concert and look at the bendy lights. Not a good idea. I'll just leave it at that. You're
Yeah.
opening yourself up to damage. You're setting yourself back by doing that. And I'd be very careful if you're using them, not recreate, but just as fun time,
Yeah.
because it's not
Yeah.
not what it's meant for. You have anything before I jump
Agreed.
into?
No, I mean, I resonate with everything you're saying. I mean, I think any drug substance you're putting into your body, it needs to be very thoughtfully done. Because it's either going to be a tool or you're going to be a crutch and you're going to be reliant on whatever feeling it may give you. And so, yeah,
Hmm.
100%. And I think with any drug, and I think ayahuasca lives here. I got one for ayahuasca. Yeah, so I agree with there. But I heard this said somebody recently, and I was chatting with, said something about that Bali is the mother of ayahuasca, and I think I get it. I don't know what you think about that, but since we're jumping in on that subject, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and your experience.
Absolutely. So psychedelics in general are all over the world. Um, Ayahuasca vine mainly grows in the Amazon. Uh, so ayahuasca is a mix of, primarily, there's many ways to make it, but it's a mix of the ayahuasca vine, which the science name, it's like Bacteriope proces or something. I can never remember the name, but the vine and a plant called chacruna. So it's a very intricate process of brewing it together. It takes a long time to do it, but it produces this psychoactive brew to where you drink it, you're going to have an experience. So that's just the ayahuasca vine. In the Amazon, in addition to that, there's about 30 other plants that contain dimethyltryptamine, DMT. Uh, it's not just ayahuasca. There's a whole bunch. In Africa, there's a tree bark called iboga, which is gaining popularity, but that primarily grows in Africa and other similar climates. But the main spot's Africa. And then obviously mycelium, or mushrooms that grow that contain DMT. Those sprout up all over the world. So if you're a person that looks at psychedelics and says, they're evil, or, if you do one of these things, it's the devil, it's bad spirits, which we could get into a conversation uh, on that if you want. I would just say, why is this stuff here? And I'm not promoting psychedelics, because I would want anyone out there to know that there is nothing, in my experience, there is nothing more powerful than breath work. Everything that you would want to accomplish with psychedelics is possible with breath work. And it seems funny or simple, but it really is that simple. You are equipped with all the tools you need to purify your vessel. And breathing, I mean, I've done it all. Like, I wrote down this list the other day, but primary care physician, plant medicines, talk therapy, every self-help book that's ever been written, listening to a motivational speaker, prayer, affirmations, music, journaling, antidepressants, though I don't believe in them. Combine all of those. Breathwork is more
Yeah.
powerful than all of
Yeah.
those combined. And it took me about 6 years to really understand it. And I actually just finished an instructor course in breathwork and cold exposure, and
Mm.
got to that kind of culminating experience with the body releasing its DMT, which it's produced in the body, it's released during birth and death, and you have the ability to release it through breathwork. And that's it. That is the secret. It,
Yeah.
there's nothing above this. I know that there's not, because it's something that's hard to do. You have to generate it yourself. You have to either be in the right headspace to go for it. You have to train your lungs, or you have to have someone guiding
Yeah.
you, pure at heart, that has good intention. 90% of all this stuff you see on Instagram, wellness, 90% of it's fluff. A lot of it is
Well,
just
I think,
people grabbing onto an
oh,
identity, or they're just looking at something as, oh, I can make money. Oh, I can. A true holistic practitioner wants to work with as many people as possible, teach the tools, and move on. They don't want a shaman, guru, god status. They just want to show people the tools and
yeah.
move on, impart the knowledge and move on. We're all going to the same place, and it's really simple. At the end of the day, it's up to each individual to, you know, either stay in their discomfort, whether that causes you to drink too. And I'm not against alcohol. Like, sure, have a couple drinks, relax. But we all know that most people, as if you keep drinking through your 30s and into your 40s, and it becomes something to where you need it to socialize, or you need it to have sex with your partner, or you need it to calm down, it's gonna rapidly increase your aging process, and it's good chemically in the body to drink that much. But it's up to each
You're,
individual to say, I want to change. I think there's something more. Everything is fine. I'm okay. My life's good. I make a lot of money. You know, I have good sex with my
well, you're
partner.
describing something that's like, that's the most difficult thing, I believe, and that's like to turn the inner eye and be like, it's you. Like, you have to do it. Nothing external will help you. Not a pill, not a drug, not any other thing. It's like, this
Hmm.
is, you are in control. Plan on suffering, plan on doing difficult things, plan on, whatever, like, probably food. You just described food, dude. That's like an addiction. If people aren't tracking and controlling it, it's an addiction to stuff. Like that's an addiction. Same thing with, I think these even more so. These are an addiction of like, this is the most addictive thing in our culture right now, period. The cell phone.
Hmm.
And then that's like, how do you stop yourself? Like, I can barely control myself. And how is my, 14-year-old son gonna do it then? And
Right.
that's the toughest thing, is like, hey, you're the problem, bro. When you're like, how do you tell people, when you go up to somebody and say like, hey, you're the problem, they're just like, no, I'm not, fuck you. And it's just like, hey, just breath work, that would help. That's bullshit, right? Because it's difficult to sit silent, to sit and power through. Speaking of breath work, I did yin yoga and then to yoga nidra today for 90 minutes. And I mean, that's right. You're like, because most people are like, what? You just kind of you just leaned into some positions for a little while, breathe, and then just laid on your back for, and it's like, well, that's like, well, again, like I do things differently than you, motherfucker. Like I just do think that's the idea. But yeah, that's the toughest thing to turn that in our eye and be like, it's you. Like, and they're just like, no, I'm good, I'm good. And I think they don't even want to be helped because they're stuck in a pleasure trap, right? What do you?
Well,
I
I think
don't
too,
know.
like the word yoga. I mean, that sets off alarms. I can only go off American men because it's the culture I grew up in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if a guy hears yoga or, hey, I'm going to do some yoga,
Oh,
like in their brain, they
yeah,
start constructing this image of who you are and that you're feminine and you're a
yeah,
hippie and you're weird and you're not one of the guys. Because we're
yeah,
conditioned in
yeah,
America to hold our emotions in, to be angry, and to somehow associate anger with power. But at the end of the day, on the other side of the spectrum, when you're in your own little internal world and you're looking in the bathroom mirror and you realize that you have to take a pill to get an erection. You have to take a pill for your cholesterol. You have to take a pill to keep your blood pressure so that you don't have a heart attack. You gotta wonder what's really going on. But the fun thing is you can say yoga, you can say, an Eastern term like from India, and it just immediately people check out. But with things like stretching, breathing, brain waves, like if the fun thing is, and again, it took me 6 years to fully understand breathwork. But if you really want tools, you'll get with a breathwork instructor or someone and start figuring it out. But it's funny because, you know, someone can hear breathwork and you're like, oh, that's woo, because they've seen these videos of holotropic breathing and girls in hippie clothes hyperventilating themselves. And they're like, these people are fucking crazy. Just to hear breathwork, and it's like, no, man, fuck breathing. Like, screw breathing. You don't need to. That's stupid. And it's like, well, it's something you do 25,000 times per day. But to make the connection of how you breathe, whether you breathe through your mouth all day, a lot of guys are on CPAP machines starting at 8, and now it's working its way into the early 30s.
bro.
That's it's tough to make that connection. And I've been doing everything private. I've really stayed away from the internet, but I'm getting to the point where you just got to adapt to the times. And I'm really getting into breathwork coaching because I'm inspired to help that demographic and to share my
Well, I mean,
story,
even the breath,
how
the
it's helped
mouth
me.
breather thing. Yeah, the mouth breather thing I thought was just a comment I made to people that were morons or
Right,
idiots. But
right.
but the breath, mouth breathing literally reshapes and forms your jaw and face. And I'm like, I remember seeing this, and I'm like, holy shit, it's real. God. But it's like that's like again, like even I think in there are some things in the Marine Corps, like I go back to where you're just like, it's like shut your fucking mouth, right? Like nobody's most Marines, right? 99, it's like their mouths are shut, dude. Like don't because you don't want to be a mouth breather.
Right.
Then you're like, yeah, 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 that's right.
It's right in front of us. So I come back to Aya. I'll do my spiel on Aya, but I want to repeat, you don't need psychedelics. The best shamans or plant medicine facilitators, you're with a good one when they say, look, I'm not a shaman. I'm just me. We're, you know, in Lakesh, I'm in you, you're in me. We're all just a consciousness. And you're
Yeah.
here to get an experience, but I'm not helping you doing. I'm providing an experience, and usually that's going to be with music and other tools that protect you and can help release stuff. So Aya is just a completely different experience from mushrooms. My weed dealer in Costa Rica, his name was Oran, very witty Jewish dude. I was battling through weed for years, just continuing to numb it down. And finally, when I did quit, I got withdrawals, and I'm like, okay, it's really overdoing it. We could be a whole nother discussion, but what this guy said to me about is really all you need to know. And he said, ayahuasca just shows you what you are. And it's up to you how you're going to use that information, that experience in your day-to-day life to become a better person, or really to purify yourself, to get
Yeah.
back to your essence, to do the things that you really want to be doing, to create your dream life. So with Aya, it's, you typically go to a ceremony at night, and you be in a circle. Sometimes there's a fire in the middle. Sometimes it's in like an indoor maloka. And you drink it and you start to feel the effects. And people will typically have strong sensations, visions. They'll see fractals, colors, lights, etc. But yeah, I've used it, and it's definitely a good tool. I know that it helped me a lot, and it's fun. But I will say, if you're using it, just like mushrooms, if you keep going to these ceremonies, and because social circles, you no doubt will see this in Bali, Costa Rica, and Mexico are the main spots for ceremonies, retreats. But social circles kind of form up around them, and sometimes like kind of shaman worship, or people putting the facilitators in like a god status or a mommy daddy status. But if you keep going and keep getting the experience, which I'm not going to lie, it's a completely overwhelming. Every time I've gone, I'm just like, wow. Because you get the purest unconditional love feeling you could ever possibly imagine. And it's like nothing I had ever experienced in my life. And it's just so completely overpowering. And it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. And to me, it's like, all right, well, how do I get this in my life? All right, I've always wanted to play the guitar. All right, so I started actually playing the guitar. In my 20s, I would buy the guitar, set it in the corner of my apartment, and I'd look at it every once in a while and be like, yeah, I should practice. And then I'd move and I'd get rid of it, and then I'd buy another one. I actually started opening up my heart to music, and I was having these amazing experiences with music, and I started playing, and then that led to me bringing my guitar to the ceremony and still being afraid to play, and then just kept trying and trying, and now I'll play 6, 7 songs and sing, and that's something I was absolutely terrified to do, to play music and sing in front of people. So it definitely helps you conquer your fears. It's like an assessment, um,
Yeah.
and it's really a tool. But if you keep going and you don't work on yourself or improvement, that's where you get into the abuse, or what everyone really calls it, is just, it's like a cult, because you're just going to party and get
Yeah.
high, and you're kind of lying to yourself. And that's the thing in the spiritual crowd, is people will drink ayahuasca and they're like, I have these amazing experiences, and they go back into town and they're like, none of these people know, they're below me. As we used to say in the military, that's like taking a knee and repeatedly punching yourself in the face, because that's what is commonly referred to as a spiritual ego. So
Hmm.
you have all these great tools, but you're sectoring yourself off from society because you're like, no, I'm better. They don't understand. I need to only associate with these people. You're walking down the street like, I'm the Tits McGee. I'm it. Like, so yeah, it can lead you down that route. And I've certainly met people like that. And to be honest, man, like I love everyone. I don't believe in good or bad. I know we're all on the same path. Um, there's a lot of illusions that can be kind of created in this experience, and separation obviously is the biggest one. We're so connected in more ways than we could ever imagine. I mean, if you can't, everyone's had the experience where they've thought of someone and then they've received a text message within minutes. And you and
Oh
I have
yeah.
had this to where we haven't talked for 6 months or caught up. We just kind of have a little gap, and then you'll think about me, and then I text you the next day. And if you can't look at that and understand that there's a bigger kind of like the real Wi-Fi network between
Yeah.
humans,
Yeah.
um, if it doesn't make you wonder and it doesn't make you want to kind of research that or better understand it, it just comes down to the individual level of curiosity. But Aya is great. I mean, for me, I did fall into that trap of going and going and going. And if you don't allow the time to integrate, and there's plenty of people that can help you integrate, and again, it's you're at the mercy of who that person is, and are they just out for your money, or do they really care? Do they know what they're talking about? It's tough to sift through that, but you got to use your gut. Your gut will never lie to you. But yeah, with Aya, I fell into that trap of the whole, going a lot, and it doesn't give you the time to integrate the change. And, for people, obviously the boomer generation and organized religion, it makes people think certain things. But, I would look at any boomer and or someone that says it's evil and this and that. I've never been in better health, mentally, emotionally, physically. I won't even say the word spiritually. Like, just take that part out. I've never been in better health, and we live in a crab pot mentality world where kind of not even from conditioning from childhood and the marketing and the nuclear family unit. Not even that. It's within us. There's this force that's like uh, regarding happiness. It's kind of like, well, if I can't have it, neither can you. And we kind of are those crabs where you're either the analogy is you have the crabs in the pot, and if one crab tries to
Yeah.
climb out, the others pull it back
It's a
in.
zero-sum game mentality. Yeah, I'm tracking.
So you basically in life you have to decide, do I want to be one of the crabs that's pulling the other crabs down, or do I want to lift everyone up? Literally everyone that I come into contact with, do I want to lift them up?
Yeah.
And that's your
Yeah.
thoughts, your actions, the way you live your life. Um, Whether or not you have addictions, because if you have addictions, you're going to wear them, et cetera, et cetera. But what's interesting is in this social media slash celebrity world that we've kind of created, there's like a lubber line where once a once a crowd gets that fame, if you will, and we could get into what stardom is and all the energy of being on a screen and occupying someone's attention, or in a
Yeah.
stadium filled with 80,000 people. But once, it could be even be in a neighborhood like, oh, he owns the car wash and is a doctor and has this house with this pool. His life is better than mine. I admire him. So I'm not trying to pull him down. I'm in awe of that family and that person, which you don't actually know their inner struggles or
Oh yeah.
whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's basically that line. So I feel like that line has created a lot of problems with like social culture, like what it is to be human. Because everyone's kind of dreaming and like, oh, if only I had more money or this. But at the end of the day, like, there's just right now. And you
Yeah.
have to figure out how to be happy in the moment, and everything else will follow. I mean, you can read The Power of Now, but if you're so far gone, you can't even comprehend any of it. So at the end of the day, I would always say, just believe in breathwork and believe in
Yeah.
the ability to change yourself through breathwork. And trust me, you will change because it's built into the system. But yeah, with
I believe it.
Aya, like to me, it's a tool. It's like I'll go if I feel I need it, but I'm certainly not doing the whole tribe thing where, you know, I'm only associating with these 15, 20 people and going to dinners and drinking Aya all the
Yeah.
time, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but yeah, it's psychedelics are interesting. They're it takes to be like I want to go try that. I think there's something there for me. And you have these incredible experiences, and I'm guilty of trying to push it on other people. I've done it with you, like, hey, bro, come down to Playa, like, you got to try. Like, that's if the person, if they
Ah.
feel there's something there for them, I got led to it because I needed it. Like, I really
Yeah.
needed, I had a big ego. I needed to keep emotionally purging all this stuff from my life and make sense of it. And it helped me immensely. But I first heard the word in the operations room in our squadron. Our buddy Jay was like, ayahuasca. And I'm like, what was that word you just said? He's like, oh, it's some like Indian plant brew and you drink it and trip balls. And I remember in that moment, this is in like 2016, my
Yeah. I
deep
don't know what
inner
that is.
subconscious was like, I'll try that. I mean, I'll try anything. I'm fucked up. Like
Yeah.
I'm so anxious. I'm
Dude.
just hiding it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was chatting with another gent on this show, and he had mentioned that between ibogaines and maybe 5-MeO DMT, and then certainly ayahuasca, that his feeling is that it's almost sentient, that and that's kind of like this connection where it's like, oh my God, how, you kind of, it's hard to believe that, but then you're like, then once you've had the experience, you're like, oh, this was an experience where this plant, this medicine is sentient and opens a door into this, it opens the doorway that's already fucking there. It's all around you, and you just kind of like peek through it for a little bit and like, hey buddy, here's this connected, we're connected to everything. Kind of love is kind of the key. Try that first, rather than, it's like the discipline of love rather than just discipline. 'Cause I've certainly heard that. I've been told that. Um, and I think that that's just the unique thing about it, and that's kind of why, that's, when you're chatting about this stuff, is like, I think that it is so unique and so special, and not a magic bullet, but pretty fucking close to be a tool for people that are struggling with taking their own life. That could be a tool for them. Then it's like, then
Oh
add on
yeah.
breath work, then add on, like, change your diet, change your habits, put atomic habits in place, like, add on that, then you like, boom, I'm out of it, rather than like, here's a pill, here's a cream, here's a pill, here's, like, just this, it's just insane.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and that's why, I wanted to have your thoughts and experiences on it. But thank you for sharing that, dude. That's I know that that's a lot of deep, intimate knowledge. And so, but thank you for sharing that, because I know that it's helpful for people to always have a perspective on it from somebody as smart as a Marine officer. Just like yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
I don't know
absolutely. And
what's next, but yeah,
just to, just to, I just want to highlight this again. If you're looking for an experience, like talk to people about the facilitator that you're seeking out, because there are a lot of cash farms in Costa Rica and Mexico
all
and in
right.
Bali too, where if you sit with the wrong person who's just in it for the money and they really don't give a shit about you, it's all just an act. It's you're not going to get as good of an experience. Um, so
Okay, yeah.
I would really look for recommendations before you sign up for a fourth. You know, these retreats are getting insane. $4,000. the prices here in Mexico, there's a guy now charging like $170 for the night, and it's a lot of there's debates on should this stuff come out of Peru and where it's grown naturally. But for me, I'm at
Hmm.
the point with breathwork where I could never do a psychedelic again, and I'd be totally cool with that because I understand what's possible with
Yeah.
breathwork, and to be able to generate that within yourself from your own, training and will and your intention to heal, to purify yourself, there's no more powerful force in the universe than that.
Yeah.
And just be careful. And same thing with mushrooms. Like, I would honestly say mushrooms are a better start than Aya. Aya is a completely different experience, but find someone that knows what they're doing and they're not, they're using it for self improvement, and learn from them. Learn from YouTube, but don't go to a concert. Don't hang out with 10 people you don't know and do mushrooms. Like, that is not a good
Yeah.
idea.
All right, dude. Well, I think we're over. I don't know where we're at from it being synced up from that one, but over an hour, hour 20, 30. But I think we'll cap it off there. Well, till next time, bud. But thank you for being here, sharing your journey, your experiences, loss. I appreciate it, and I value that very much. And thank you for your time, brother.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure, Blake, and I love the name Zen and call signs. I gotta say my last
Yeah,
call
thanks.
sign was Booby.
What,
BUBI.
booby?
What yeah,
Hank.
Hank. Yeah, from the
Me,
movie.
myself, and Irene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's
I
too
think it was
much.
fitting, dude. You cut the haircut. I'm gonna put a post clip. We'll put a picture of you cutting my hair for the call sign.
Please.
It's legit. All right. Well, I'll pause recording here in a sec, but thank you for your time, brother. This is in a call signs, and I'll see you next.
Peace.